In the relatively short period of time, which is the last 12 years of anime, Isekai has gone from a strange and unrecognizable term as otherworldly to most of the community as the settings in which these stories take place, to now being so synonymous with anime itself that it's practically assumed that pretty much any fantasy show that drops is going to have some sort of otherworld gimmick going on. Anime involving going to another world and taking place in that world have been around a lot longer than the point in which it started to become really cemented as its own thing in the medium, and much longer than a lot of people even realize, with it first starting to pick up steam in the late 90s, to the point where it was already being parodied as early as 2001. But it had for a large part of its history really just been used as a tool for the writers and was never really a defining part of the story's structure. That was until the early 2010s when it really started to blow up. This coinciding with the exact same time that anime really started to become mainstream and well known. Which was definitely by no means a coincidence, because as much as we love to hate on trashy isekai, those same shows are really the only reason that the industry has exploded to the point that it has over the last 15 years. In the midst of this, isekai developed into essentially its own genre, with its own list of tropes and plot points that have become mainstays. The tropes associated with it have changed a lot over the years though. From the main goal originally always being for the main characters to get back to their original world, which is something I swear most anime nowadays don't even mention a lot of the time. It also started as pretty normal to get isekai'd as a group, which shifted towards being isekai'd by yourself. Even the method of getting transported to the other world has shifted from some sort of like magical incident or portal towards now getting wrecked by a truck going for a fucking kill streak. The way you ended up when you got there has also changed, from just showing up as yourself to showing up as some sort of different version of yourself, to now where you're seeing a lot more of people showing up as a newborn baby in the new world, which I still haven't come around on that one yet. It's kind of weird to be honest, and definitely has some implications, but that's a topic for another video, I think. The one development, though, that I think has been the most transformative with it has been that of the reverse isekai. Because this is not as simple as person from another world comes to our world. I mean, it kinda is, but hear me out. Because what these shows do is take a lot of the same tropes that we see in standard isekai, many of which have just either become played out or less popular, and replicate them in a different and unique way in our world, leading to more or less pretty unique storytelling opportunities, even when compared to your standard isekai. So, while Dragon Maid, Hinamatsuri, and Gabriel Dropout might all be great shows and technically qualify as reverse isekai to some people, I'm not really going to be including them in what I talk about here, because they don't fall into the same type of tropes that I consider to define actual reverse isekai. So if that upsets you, I don't know, fucking cry about it or something, I guess.
We do not care.
What a lot of people will first think of when you say reverse isekai is obviously the minimum wage devil himself, aka the devil is a part-timer. Where, after a crazy incident in another world while the hero makes an assault on the Demon Lord's castle, a portal opens up, transporting them all to another world. Our world. Here, their powers are limited compared to what they used to be, and surprisingly enough, Satan himself is pretty chill with just falling in line with his new master, Ronaldo McDonaldo-sama. The story then more or less centers around the issues that he runs into due to the fact that some of the other people from his world decided they are not quite so chill with no longer being malevolent gods and now having to pay taxes instead of collect them. With a lot of the meat of the story really focusing around all these people from the other world adjusting to ours and kind of just accepting it, with this being one of the least isekai-y reverse isekai, much more resembling your standard fish out of water type of story. And I might not have even included it if it wasn't so synonymous with the concept of this whole video within the community. So there it is. You're welcome. Be happy now. For me, when I think about the earliest incident of reverse isekai that I can remember, then my mind immediately goes to one of the earliest regular isekai that I remember watching in Inuyasha. Another show just like the last one that we are all going to pretend never got any content after the 2010s. Inuyasha is, for the most part, a pretty standard isekai, at least by the older format, and a fucking good one at that. But depending on the point in the story, it's basically no obstacle at all for my wife Kagome to go back and forth between her world and Inuyasha's. And if you know anything about Inuyasha himself, it's that he has mad separation anxiety from his Dami Mami.
It should have been me, not him!
So on more than one occasion, he decides to just take a hop into our world and check on his girl while she's away. Which of course leads to a lot of that fish out of water and contrasting worlds experience when you're taking someone from feudal Japan, yokai and all, and placing them into the modern day. And while generally speaking, it's a pretty minor part of the story, and we don't ever really get to see too much of him in our world, I still vividly remember the first time that I saw him doing more than, simply stepping foot into our world, because it really opened my mind up with different ways that this could totally change up the way that the story is told. Probably my favorite execution on this type of show would be The Great Jahi Will Not Be Defeated. The story involves a demon lord, or at least runner-up demon lord, getting sent to another world along with a cast of associated characters due to an incident involving a female chosen one hero coming and trying to defeat the demon lord. And no, I do not see any similarities with this to anything I've talked about previously in this video. But unlike McDonald's Mao-sama over here, Jahi does not have almost any of her powers, and it takes just about everything she has to even appear as an adult in this world. That is, while her enemies and rivals in this world are basically all doing far better than she is. So while Mao worked minimum wage for fun, Jahi works minimum wage so she doesn't literally fucking starve to death on the streets of Japan. And this is how you do a reverse isekai. You take the isekai trope of a character with no powers and no hose being given both of these things in another world and living their best life, and instead you take a powerful, arrogant character and reduce them down to a nobody fighting for their life, just trying to make it as a human. Jahi herself is fucking perfect, and watching her struggle to do even the most basic of tasks is hilarious and adorable, especially when she is constantly trying to put up the front that she is just as powerful as she used to be in her world, which make her constant failures even more funny as she tries to maintain any semblance of her former dignity. We also get stuff like the magical girl who tried to defeat Jahi in the other world, who, instead of being a well-adjusted individual like Emi is, who is doing quite well with the transition, Kyoko is basically delusional and getting arrested for trying to act like a magical girl in public. Instead of just sending someone to another world the other direction, you're taking basically everything that we know about how other world stories work and flipping it on its head, giving us unique chances to see how different types of characters react in a situation that is entirely different than what you get in a regular isekai. And it also kind of mirrors those rare times when we get an isekai where the main character gets transported to another world, but doesn't have any sort of special abilities, or at least any overpowered ones, and they have to come to terms with the fact that they are in a new world and still just as much of a loser, which often leads to some of the very best isekai out there. And then, similar to the story that inspired this video, which I will not be naming because it's kind of a recent spoiler, I have to include one of the shows that really took off recently with the concept of the old double isekai. Isekai Oji-san. This concept has been seeing more traction recently, but if we're being honest, a lot of the double isekai that we get kind of fucking suck. Isekai Oji-san, though, uses it pretty well, largely due to its comedic leaning, but also in huge part due to the amount of time that he has been gone, making it so that he still has that otherworld culture shock situation going on. He also is a Sega fanboy, so upon returning to our world, his first question is about which Sega console is out. Because surely they must have won the console war, which I imagine is more of an issue with just being delusional than anything else, since he was around to see the Dreamcast come out. his false hopes being crushed upon learning the fate of Sega was so traumatic that he uses magic to erase the memory of him being told that Sega lost the console wars and stopped making consoles from his mind. It was just too much for him to handle. And it isn't helped by the fact that he is completely and entirely incapable of social interaction, both in our world and in the other one too, to honestly quite an extreme level. Mix that with, let's say, him not having the most approachable face, and you end up with someone who you would definitely call the cops on. Which means that even in the other world where he has all these powers and did all this crazy stuff, he still was not a super cool, popular guy. Despite that fact, he did manage to pull a genuine tsundere, but because this man went to the other world before the concept of tsunderes really became a thing, he didn't understand what was happening and thought she was just being a bitch and didn't like him. So he just dumped her ass, straight up abandoned her.
ちゃんと責任持って次の町で監禁してやった。
So again, we see this one succeeding because it executes on the idea of reverse isekai by taking the concepts of the instantly great and loved hero who quickly grows from being a nobody on Earth to being super socially capable and outgoing on the new world, which is just about as bullshit as a lot of the powers these characters end up with, and again flips that on its head. Other examples of this are with something like Gate, which is kind of a two-way isekai, similar to like what I mentioned happening with Inuyasha. Gate is another interesting one, which I think is kind of just a unique mix of different concepts and genres without playing too much into cliches of any of them. Plays with the isekai and reverse isekai stuff a bit, but again, it's not in the same style that you might expect from an isekai. And sometimes feels more like a sci-fi movie where people are traveling between different planets rather than an isekai where they're traveling between different worlds, which in our context mean different things, all right? All right. We also, of course, have Recreators, which is a mass reverse isekai that uses the video game tropes that we so often see in standard isekai and leads to a situation where basically the human characters and Japan get forced into the middle of an anime fight scene without being prepared for it, aka shit is kind of just getting fucked up and nobody knows what to do about it. This one is a lot more about trying to figure out what's going on with a lot of these different characters being sent over and how to manage them and all of their problems, which is very reminiscent of a lot of the oldest isekai type stories of all time, like Digimon or Kiba, where a lot of the story is based around the happenings in the world and having to navigate that to be able to try and help or even just survive in these other worlds. Regardless of the form it comes in though, I think that reverse isekai have a lot of potential. And even with so much of the community hating on generic isekai, and despite the fact that we've had quite a few reverse isekai to this point, they still manage to feel fresh and continue to do unique things with pretty much every one that comes out, with any semblance of quality that is, which can partially be contributed to the fact that we get like maybe 1 or 2 of these a season compared to like 5+ regular isekai every 3 months. And I think that these shows deserve more attention than they get a lot of the time, with a good amount flying more under the radar than a lot of the isekai slop that gets pushed out every season. Speaking of slop, my next video will be another talking more specifically about a singular anime again, and unlike most of my videos, it will not be quite so positive, so prepare yourself for that one. Cause with this video, I wanted to start adding more conversation about general topics into my content. I want to keep mixing it up, talking about different things like specific anime compared to broader genres and more generally concepts, and then talking about these things in both positive and negative lights. Because while I fucking love anime, that extreme passion for the medium also comes with just as much hatred for the stuff that I don't like. But for now, that's all I've got. If you liked this video or felt any way about this more genre-based video concept compared to more specific singular show-based ones like the last couple of videos, which will be the main chunk of the content going forward regardless, then make sure to leave a like and let me know your thoughts in the comments. And most definitely make sure you are subscribed so you don't miss my next video where we find out just how many people we can piss off with my objectively correct anime takes before I switch back to glazing some recent shows which I have been itching to talk about. Until then though, I'll see you next time when I talk more about anime and get way too into it. Peace.